what can I tell you about Paul? He is someone who is extraordinary and prolific and still going strong at the age of 71. I don't think anybody here would guess his age upon meeting him. Now, I guess I'm going to give him the benefit of this harvest, even though we're only midway through it. This morning we talked to some guys and we did harvest more Pinot Noir. We're in the heart of a good harvest back home. There was a little heat spike there, but it didn't do much, and now it's kind of settled into something more manageable for what they like for the pick. So we have that oddity at Paul Hobbs that we make Chardonnay and Pinot, just like everyone else on the cool coast. But we also make Cabernet from Napa, like nobody does where we are. And so our harvest tends to be a little longer and drawn out because these grapes kind of come in the order I mentioned them, and we're getting kind of maybe halfway through the Pinot Noir pick. And there's a spring in the step on the guys on the crush pad because the fruit is looking gorgeous and beautiful, and all the harvest interns that we hire on from Italy and France and Argentina and Chile, and this mix of all these beautiful young agile people come to our crush pad after their resumes have been kind of filed through, and they're here, and you know, sometimes that's a recipe for disaster if you put an Australian or something in the mix and just nobody comes to work but hungover or something. But this year it looks like a very good mix of people. So talking to our cellar master, he said the spirit is high. So that feels good to us. All right, who is this Paul Hobbs? Paul was born to a farming family in western New York. Way up there by the Canadian border, Niagara County. Second of 11 kids. So his breakfast looked like, you know, almost more than half of the table. And I think a lot of responsibility fell on Paul's young shoulders. Work ethic is a theme of almost any article written about Paul Hobbs. And there is this kind of drive that to this day nobody can keep up with this guy as far as what he's willing to take on, the dedication to the work. It really is the embodiment of his life is his work, and that gives him a huge advantage given how talented he is. He left home after farming apples and chickens for his family for Notre Dame chemistry. He swore himself off farming, ironically, when he left home, but the NASA astronaut program was the goal at the time. And he had a good legitimate shot at it, but his eyesight prevented his progress in the program. So next, the great-grandfather physician, who was his hero, was the model, and so medical school was the next plan. But luckily, the priest at Notre Dame, the botany professor priest, talked him out of that path and into wine instead. And the priest himself was a winemaker at Christian Brothers. Some of us remember that old brand, and at one time there were actually Christian Brothers at that brand. And for our younger guests, Christian Brothers was once the largest producer of wine in the U.S., especially because they had a strong hold on the industry after Prohibition, because they had that loophole because they were making sacrament wine, so they could continue to make wine. Yeah. And of course they made a lot more than just that. And so this old guy came from that old tradition, and he told Paul Hobbs about the more modern movement and the buzz that was starting to happen in California, in Napa Valley most specifically. And just about 2 hours from there, University of California, Davis was the first to put forward a viticulture and enology master's program comprehensively, and Paul Hobbs was in the second ever graduating class. And this is a trend throughout Paul's entire career. All the things that you hear about, Paul seemed to be kind of right at the beginning of all these things. Mid-70s Napa is considered kind of the dawn of the modern light. And so Paul arrives at Robert Mondavi's store, if we've heard his name before, in 1977. So dead center at the middle of the American movement, and the place that mattered the most. And Mondavi looks at Paul and tells him to go get more experience because you're too young and have no experience. But then read his master thesis and was so impressed he hired him on into the lab. The reason why he got hired, Paul found out later, is that Mondavi was kind of in a spot in that he was starting this partnership with the Lafitte Rothschild, the Baron, and this is, you know, the great their first growth from Bordeaux, and this talk of what was to be Opus One was starting, and the partnership. And so Mondavi just didn't know what he would be able to offer as far as history, knowledge, know-how. You're going against several hundred years of this kind of expertise. And so innovation is what he thought that we might add, and isn't that an American idea? And to me, Mondavi is a great American the way Edison is, or something like that. Somebody who had so much spirit for innovation that he improved everyone's life as a result of his work. And that's how he's viewed in our industry, in the inner circle. So great man, and he sees this brain on Paul and reads this master thesis that Paul had written on the virtues of French versus American oak barrels, short-term, long-term effect on wine on a microbiological study, which was leagues ahead of anyone else thinking these terms, and that's what got Paul this kind of pet spot in the lab. And by Paul's third year, he was promoted to the head of the new enology team, which became Opus One. So amazing as a prodigy, and he was in charge because of his farming background of all the harvests at the Tokelon vineyard in his tenure with Mondavi, which was like portents of things to come. And then he leaves Opus in '84 knowing he could never be promoted, because head winemaker at Opus was Tim Mondavi, so he wasn't in that job. And off he goes to Simi Winery, which was a major player in that era, head winemaker slash CEO of that brand, 85 through 90. But by 86, he makes the seminal move to the Southern Hemisphere, where it is true to say that Paul is more heralded and more impactful than any other place in the world, believe it or not. Mendoza, Argentina, where he is a legend to this day, the father of modern Malbec as he's known, and that Paul Hobbs was the very first to make 100% Malbec in Argentina, the first to import one into the US, the first to be rated by Robert Parker by that nation, and the first to score 100 points for that nation. So he moved the needle a lot there, and he still owns and operates his winery called Viña Cobos, which to this day is the single highest rated and most expensive wine of that nation. So given that he's had 39 harvests down there, now 84 lifetime harvests, given that he's shuffled it through the both hemispheres all these years. Meanwhile, back at home in California, as if that weren't enough to keep him busy, he starts consulting independently, which today is so common, but back in the 80s, it was kind of a new thought to be head winemaker at lots of brands simultaneously. And all of a sudden, you can make an artisanal amount of wine in Napa Valley and get noticed by the world, the cult wine movement, as it was called. And that's what birthed the need for a consultant-style winemaker. And that's when Paul takes on 50 clients over a 5-year period in Napa. He was head winemaker at 50 brands in that era, and we can play 1 degree of separation between Paul and the universe as a result of head winemaking at Laird and Lewis and Peter Michael and Fisher and Constant and vice versa, and probably some places in the cellar, probably every shelf I bet he's touched in some way. So Paul has been so prolific that way. And that's when he decided to launch his own label. So 1991 is the first year we made a wine with Paul Hobbs' name on it. Single vineyard wines like we're going to taste all night from the best vineyard sources was his concept, but he could not afford to buy that level of vineyard to begin with. So he bought fruit from grower sites that he hand selected, and that's the reason why he made Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Cab, because he wasn't beholden to one microclimate through ownership. He was allowed to kind of think outside the box. And he just made a very small amount of each in a rented space, and those wines scored so astronomically that it like changed his life with its momentum, and that's what emboldened him to buy land. So the winery that I hope you all come visit is located in Sebastopol, so West County, Sonoma, in the cool fog of the coast, where Pinot and Chardonnay do so well. And he named his estate to the initial 14 acres that he planted in 1998 to the Catherine Lindsay estate, because that was the great-grandma who founded the apple farm back home, so we named that place after her. Then the renowned architect who just passed last month, sadly, Howard Backen, designed the winery and the hospitality house, 0204, and then the eventual acquisition of so many other vineyards. So now 16 single vineyards we make wine from. Paul owns 11 of those. Everything is made at the one mothership in Sebastopol. So even the Napa Cab that we grow is harvested at night and arrives to the crush pad by sunup. You'll be happy to know that we are certified sustainable in our farming practices, so no chemical pesticides, herbicides, or milicides. We don't inoculate our wines with yeast, so these were all naturally fermented across the board. We don't filter, we don't fine our wines, and the oak barrels we use are French, without exception. Mendoza in California we talked about, but he also owns wineries in Spain, France, Armenia, and New York, and still has about 30 global consultations going to the day. Maybe a one-of-a-kinder in that if you can think of another who earned what he did, the empire that he has, just through winemaking. No inheritance, no other industry. This guy just did it as a winemaker, and to me that makes him entirely special. The other good news is that the hope is to keep it in the family when that day comes, so his eldest daughter, Agustina Hobbs, is now 30 and graduated from Cornell some years back, and she looks like a wonderful candidate for the next generation of ownership. So keeping the family is the goal, so no need to fall out of love when Paul goes, because keeping the family to me is what makes wines so special oftentimes, that passion. And the corporate buy-off of so many California wines has broken so many hearts to people who really care about the artisanal level of winemaking that it takes and the dedication.